our speaker today, Barry Tollenger, when he and Luann Rosteicher from the Campaign Against Human Trafficking came into the podcast. I sat down for a podcast that we did with them, and that's been very successful, and I found out that this man has quite a bit of knowledge about human trafficking and things like that. And we got to talking. Barry, he's a volunteer for the Campaign Against Human Trafficking. I can't read my own handwriting. He's a volunteer for the Breakaway Respite Ministry, working with individuals that have dementia and Alzheimer's. He has served as a substance abuse addictions counselor in Pasadena, Maryland, and is a volunteer member of the Veterans Court Program in Glen Burnie, Maryland. So, here, this one's very important. He retired in 1998 as a lieutenant commander of the U.S. Navy Supply Corps, and holds a bachelor's degree from University of Baltimore and a master's degree from Golden State University in San Francisco. When we were talking about this, he was going to come back to us and talk about human trafficking and how we as men are responsible for doing our part in the campaign against human trafficking because of the male aspect of it all. And I thought that was a wonderful idea. And then he reached out and he says, what I'd rather do is to talk about unplugging our children from the wiring. If you go into a restaurant, you probably see a whole lot of people with their noses buried in their phones. Yeah. See that all the time. And he said that he wanted to talk to us about that sort of thing and how we can unplug. It says our children, but Barry, it's probably more like our families, I would think, and unplug the families and try to get back to that where we were. So with all of that said, because I'm running out of ad-libs, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Barry Tollenger. Barry, come on up here.
He made me sound greater than I am, believe me. Hey, I had the opportunity to be here in January with my associate, Brian Hammer, and I also had the opportunity to make a couple of the events with Jim when you guys did the hockey game and the racetrack back in April. I was going to join the club, but I was told I was GU, geographically undesirable. I live in Apollo Beach. So I thought about moving here so you could reject me on my own merits rather than where I live, okay? But I haven't. As Vern pointed out, the topic I'm going to talk about today, I really originally didn't plan to, but the more I read, the more research I did, the more it led me to there's a bigger problem. Now, I'm going to touch upon human trafficking, and that's an important topic to me. But what I'm going to share with you today is some data based on, and I'll give you my bibliography for it. There's two books, one called The Shallows that was written in 2010 that talked about where we were going with social media and the internet, okay? A follow-up book was written by a gentleman named Jonathan Haidt in 2024, and it is called The Anxious Generation. Now, how many of you have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, youngsters? What we have done in the last 10 to 15 years is really set the stage for, if you don't find this data interesting, you should find it frightening. Now, what I'm going to share with you is the data that I found in doing my research, plus a website called the American Institute for Boys and Men. Plus, I participate in a lot of webinars. I participate in a weekly advocacy call that originates out of Washington, D.C., about dealing with some of these topics. And it's also based on, as Vern alluded to, I was in a prime spot. While all this was taking place, I was hired as a contract professor at a community college just outside of Annapolis in 2009 teaching Homeland Security. And I did that for 9 years. And then I became a drug counselor, substance abuse counselor, and also was a mentor and a counselor for veterans. That gave me a perspective to see how sometimes when events are taking place, we get caught up in them, but we don't see the impact. Years later, we have to take a step back and look at it. And then we take a step and we look where we are now and possibly see where we are going. And where we are going is what tending to frighten me. So I'm going to give you a timeline, but I'm also going to tell you it's going to jump around a little bit because these are fragments that will, at the end of the presentation, tie together. I will also tell you I am not an expert on the brain. Sometimes I wake up and wonder if the hamster is going to work that day spinning the wheel, okay? I will share with you the data. You are free to challenge it. I will share with you if something is my opinion. I will say, in my opinion, or my observation. You are free to disagree with that opinion and say, I have a different one. So I understand that. I'm going to start 1959. United Nations Declaration, Year of the Child. It's a basic human right for children to have playtime. I was 12 years old. I agreed with that. We just got to get rid of school, okay? So play as a part of your education and part of your development. Very significant. 1961, and I'm going to jump through real quick. I'm just going to allude to 1961. Have you ever heard of an author called Kurt Vonnegut? Okay, Kurt Vonnegut did a series of short stories in 1961. One was called Harrison Bergeron. It's about a 10-minute read. And in that story, because of constitutional amendments, and this is a futuristic look at America, but I'm going to allude to it later on in the presentation. No one was allowed to be smarter than, physically stronger than, or more physically attractive than anybody else. And they tried to maintain that. Kind of far-fetched. You think, no way? I'm going to tell you where that is not that far in the future and part of the presentation. We jump next to 2001. What happened in 2001, about 25 years ago from right now? Terrorist attack. That changed our country, and we are still looking at that impact. We became very aware of dangers. We started taking security measures. We started having surveillance. We started having things like the Patriot Act, which didn't mean, hey, I love the flag and whatever. It meant providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorists. That was the acronym for Patriot Act, okay? Surveillance began. Now the question was, who's watching those who watch? Okay? Because if we're being watched, who's watching them? It's a food for thought. 2002, 1 year later, I lived in D.C. area. I had a territory that was Baltimore, Washington, Northern Virginia. The D.C. sniper, okay? You may or may not recall that. 23 targeted attacks, 10 people, Elliot remembers, 10 people shot, randomly picked out and died. Everything around that area came to a standstill. Events were canceled. People were concerned about, I got to protect my children. We started really sheltering in place and denying the things in life that we like to do. That's 2002. Other senseless attacks, school shootings, crazy people out there just taking their wrath out on society. We became very concerned as parents, grandparents. We started protecting our children from the real world, but we didn't protect them from the virtual world. 2010, we replaced the flip phones with smartphones, okay? Smartphones, now you didn't have to do that little awkward texting, phone calls. You were connected to the internet. That opened the world as we know it now to be a frightening place. Parents gave their kids phone. Here, this is if you need me, you have a phone. What they didn't realize is the internet and social media, where some things are good, some things you got to look at and say, have the caution signs flashing. By 2016, 78% of teens had smartphones, okay? Unfiltered access. 25% of children between the ages of 8 and 12 had access to smartphones. We took it on good faith that they were using these things wisely, right? Okay. As I referenced, I started teaching in 2009. First-year college students. Now, where I was located was proximity to Fort Meade, Maryland. If those of you who are any former military in here? Okay, I'm going to touch upon that too. Fort Meade, Maryland, one of the biggest installations the Army has, right adjacent to NSA. I had students who were military, who had just gotten out. They were active duty. I had students who worked at NSA. They couldn't tell you what they did, but they needed to get a degree in a field that had history of experience, but they didn't have the educational background to move ahead. So I learned a lot. I also learned that starting each year, I had about 75 new students. I taught 4 classes. I also taught TSA employees. That was an interesting experience. I taught live at National Airport, students from TSA at Baltimore, Washington. I taught online TSA employees across the country. My favorite was teaching live classes, But it was interesting because I noted there was a gradual each year, a lack of people coming in and talking to each other. They came in and they got these little devices out. They were looking at it. They may be texting you sitting over here 15 feet away, but there wasn't that conversation. And what we taught in Homeland Security, I taught Intro to Homeland, it was critical thinking skills, collaborative efforts. We weren't going to rehash 9/11. We were looking for the next terrorist attack, how they think, how we can solve these problems. I needed you to be involved, not sit there and hope you listen to me for an hour and leave smart. It isn't going to happen. And I tell these people, you're going to be out there in the field looking at the next threat, trying to get ahead of the curve, not behind it, okay? And I noticed this each year, and it didn't really change. Well, because I had so many students who were military, who had post-traumatic stress disorder, I got my degree in veterans counseling and substance abuse, finding in substance abuse that 50% of the people who had substance abuse problems also had mental illness. So my research started leading me on the fact that mental illness is a serious problem that it is, and it's starting at a younger age. How many of you are aware that June was Men's Mental Illness Awareness Month? Anybody aware of that? It's okay, I wasn't either. So when I started putting together the topic for Vern and a group, I started doing the reading and the research. There is a frightening correlation between young people and how their brains work. Now, all of us grew up at a time when we were young, 6 years old, 7 years old. We went out and played. We had friends in the neighborhood, right? You learned how to get along, have fights, get over it, be buddies, get dirty, stay out till dark, but at dark, come home, okay? Your borders, your boundaries kept growing, and you grew with it. The brain is a very interesting thing that has evolved over thousands of generations. We are a group of human beings that benefit from social contact. We benefit and learn from experience. We benefit from making mistakes. We can't wait till we're 18 years old and say, go out there and see the world. What we substituted was play-based growing up with information-based, phone-based. All these kids who are now in elementary school have access to these devices that is rather frightening because there's nothing to really help them understand. The brain relies on stimulation. And interesting to know that about 80% of your brain is formed by the time you're 5 years old. Then it takes a little bit of a break. It's still working. By the time you're a teenager, it's pretty much there. The prefrontal cortex is where all the memories, all the learning take places. Now imagine, how many of you play golf? All right, a bunch of you. If all you did was watch golf videos but never played, do you think you'd be a better golfer? Do you think you'd learn the game? I think that's what happens to a lot of kids. We have substituted information for experience. You got to get out there and experience it if you're going to be good at it. I think that, that's the mistake we're making, that everybody is trying, not everybody, but they want to see the world through the 4-inch screen, okay? What that has led to, unfortunately, is a false reality of what life is all about. Now, this device got worse. What happened in 2020? COVID. What did we do with COVID? We locked down. You couldn't even go to church. I lived in Maryland, and it was like, 10 people? No, you're going to be arrested, okay? You cannot have these associations. We have set ourselves back decades, maybe longer, because that impact is going to be long time felt. So 2020 comes around, and all of a sudden we start to see a whole lot of side effects. People who needed to get out and get training in certain fields, they're not getting it. They've got to do it online. Virtual reality became the way we learned. We stopped communicating, we stopped associations. Now, everybody in here, I assume, has a great love of country, great love of community, and great love of seeing the place in a better spot when you leave it. Would I be safe in making that assumption? That we're all concerned with that? I know I do. What scares me, among many things, is mental health issues. Now, the difference between anxiety and fear. Fear, let's say we're talking over here, hurricane season. If you have anxiety that we could have a hurricane this year, and that's constantly on your mind, that is going to make an imprint. That's going to make an impact on you. Fear is when the weather says it's going to be here Tuesday, it's going to be blah, blah, blah. That is fear. It passes. But if anxiety doesn't leave you, it has a compounding effect. That leads to mental illness. Mental illness right now for young people is increasing at an unbelievable rate. And what's happening is that it's manifesting itself. 25% of mental illness problems start by age 14. Okay? 75% have manifested itself by the age of 25. We're finding that more and more young people are having mental illness. We're also finding that the ways that they are dealing with it, women treat it differently than men do, because women tend to have support groups with other women. Most of us guys are not going to sit down and say, "Can I share my emotions with you?" You're going to look at me like, "No, I got something I got to do," you know. But women will talk it out. Men will isolate. Okay, that's just who we are. Okay, we're guys. We don't sit down and share our feelings and emotions. You know, a good cry is rare. I still do it, but I do it alone. Okay. What we're finding is the young women are being bullied on social media. Okay, this friend of theirs, this internet. There's a website that I discovered during my research. It's called SMVDR, Social Media Victims Remembrance Day.org. They had an event last month in DC. They're trying to get legislation passed to protect children for online protection. And we're having a tough time in the country with that. Anyway, that website highlights the thousands of kids who've committed suicide because they were either bullied, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 12-year-olds killing themselves because they feel isolated. Now, young women, when they talk about suicide, to them, it ends the physical pain and suffering that they have to endure, and that it is easier to do that than to have the living hell of being ostracized on social media. And we're talking about school-age kids. All of us went to high school. It may have been the best time of your life, may have been the worst. But it was a limited period of time. You got over it, you moved on. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that it's affecting young men differently. And young men are committing suicide. In 2023, we had 41,000 suicides in the United States, greater than the number of people who died in car accidents. 10% of that total was youth under 18. An alarming number, the rapid growing segment is young men between the ages of 24 and 30. And what we're finding is they are saying, through their suicide notes and whatever else, "I see no sense of purpose. I have no friends. I don't see a chances for a successful life." We're seeing high school students drop out. We're seeing them unable to keep up. If you look at college statistics, back in 1971, 41% of four-year degrees were given to women. And the latest statistics show that is now 59% go to women. Now, they have more opportunities. There's more career fields open to them. Used to be they went and looked for a husband, okay, back in the day when I was in school. What we're finding is young men, because of social media and because of the internet access, are dropping out of society. They're not forming those relationships. And what we're seeing, it's an acronym that is NEET. Any of you heard it? Okay. What that stands for is this now group in our culture not employed, education, or training. They are addicted to video games. They're serving no useful purpose. Where do these guys go? Do they become future leaders in our country, or are they just drains on society? So they are the ones that are isolating. We're also finding that the relationships that you normally would find are starting to diminish. Now that ties in a little bit to the human trafficking, because what happened during COVID? Sites like Pornhub, which I've never visited. How many of you have been exposed to pornography you didn't even know you were gone to? You click on something and it takes you to another site. I was there recently. What happens with the brain for these young kids, you got about 3 seconds to disengage from that website or you're sucked in, okay? The brain releases dopamine. It's a chemical and it's part of the reward structure. Your brain says, this is great, okay? But it's not a one-time shot. You need more of it to get the next high. And I reference that from the substance abuse part of my career, where drug addicts, you take drugs today. Well, tomorrow, you got to increase that dosage. You're not going to get the same high. And you'll reach a point where you're going to overdose. And with the market today for drugs, you don't know what you're buying. You get that stuff laced with God knows what. In Anne Arundel County, we had the highest death rate, and partly in America, for people who came in and over. They went up to Baltimore, shot up or whatever, died in Anne Arundel County. But the problem was that dopamine effects. You see it in sports, you see it in art, you see it in music. It's a natural phenomenon that the brain has been doing for thousands of generations. That dopamine has the same effect when you go to a website that captures your attention. Now, what has happened to us? We're at the point where we recognize we have a problem, but what do we do about it? In this country today, you have a very big division on next possible steps. And part of that is because we can't come up with laws that meet everybody's needs. Okay, I understand, I'm a free speech guy, 20 years in the military. Hey, I was in a group that we were told constantly, you're not here to practice democracy, you're here to protect it. Okay, firm believer in free speech. I was ready to give my life, like a lot of you guys, if that would have been the need. What we're finding is that when we are trying to come up with laws, if you look at 2023, there were 25 states that had age verification laws. 25 said no thank you. If you did an overlay of the states that wanted it versus the states that didn't, all the states in the Northeast from Maine down to Virginia, all the states in the West Coast, Illinois, Minnesota, didn't want it. It overlaid almost perfectly with the presidential map. Now this is on agreeing how do we protect children. Now, as a society, think back. How many of you are smokers? Cigarette smokers, okay? Any former smokers? Okay. When the American tobacco industry said, we don't want warning labels, no, there's no connection, there's no positive proof that this stuff is a bad product. They fought for years successfully with lobbyists and with laws trying to prevent it. They finally gave in and put labels on the side, okay? Warning, could cause cancer. What then happened is they were, okay, we'll stop doing advertising on TV. The Marlboro Man, Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. All of these things that you saw constantly, they had to stop. What else disappeared? Anybody want to venture a guess? What could you walk into almost any store, any lobby, any place you went? Cigarette vending machines. Okay, they fought tooth and nail to have, oh, you'll kill our business. That vending machine, very much like the internet, doesn't know whether you're 8 or 80. You put your money in, the cigarettes come out. We were able to make laws that we don't allow children to go to casinos. You can't, if I went down to the Winn-Dixie, as I've done many times, try to buy a bottle of wine, I say, all right, you got me. I'm not 21 yet, but I'm damn close. I've got to show the ID. Now, so they're not discriminating against anybody. You have to prove who you are. Yet here we are fighting what we want to do to protect kids, knowing full well the potential problems. We're seeing the suicide rate, we're seeing the college dropout, we're seeing people that aren't able to function in society, yet big tech, and this is an opinion, big tech, big pharma have too much big say in what we do as a society. Amen. It's follow this and I'll do what's best for this. Screw the rest of you, pardon me, but that's exactly the way it happens in this country, and it annoys the hell out of me because that's not what we should be all about. 250 years as a great republic, great American experiment democracy. I don't have a very positive outlook for the future from what I'm seeing, and I think we've allowed that to slip away, and we shouldn't because we're a much better society in that. So here we are. Now, the Supreme Court last week made a decision. They've been very busy. I agree with some of their stuff. Not all of it. The state of Texas brought suit against Apple and Google. They're saying you have to have legitimate age verification, not, well, we had the little box check, we assume that they're old enough, oh, they asked their parents. Crap. You know, if I'm 13 years old and I want to have something that I want to watch, I'm going to lie to you. I'm going to be truthful? No, I'm going to lie to you, okay? So Texas sued him and said, no, you have to make more than a good faith effort, and you are responsible for the content. Do you realize there's over 1 million apps that you can get on your phone? 1 million apps. That's not just some wild number. They're verified. Any business you go to, have you seen our app? You want to buy your Big Mac? Oh, you can get it on our app. Okay? So what Texas said is, no, we want you to be accountable. Nobody wants to be accountable for the problem. We don't want the outcome. We don't want the problems it creates, but not me. So Supreme Court, 5th District said, no, Texas is right. You're going to have to make the changes in your platform to protect these people. Obviously, Google, Apple, no, we can't do this. You're going to impact our business. These guys are making billions of dollars because they're selling advertising. And what they do is they keep these young people engaged on the internet and social media to where now, in some cases, they're spending 40 hours, reports our kids spending 40 hours a week on the machine. They're not getting enough sleep. They're not getting the social development that they should. In 2023, the Surgeon General of the United States, I don't know who it was, came out with a very glowing report, the benefit of social media, failing to mention the downside, failing to mention that it doesn't form social relations. I got a 20-year-old granddaughter. I couldn't love her anymore if she were human. She lives by the internet. Oh no, I got friends all over. I said, people that you don't really know who they are, if they even exist, that you'll never see. And I said, you know what I do for my passion, human sex trafficking, against it, I'm not for it, I'm against it. And the ways that they groom, recruit, and abduct women, I said, please don't trust the internet as being reliable. It's not. It's like when you were a kid. Well, if it was on TV, it must be true. We learned that's not the case, right, gentlemen? Okay, don't trust it just because it's a form of media. So what's happening is these people are reaching out to our children. And when the whistleblower at Facebook, and in 2010 was a big turning point when Facebook bought Instagram. That opened up the retweet, the I like button, share with my friend, what did you think about my post? Now all of a sudden you couldn't put that phone down because you might miss something. And it was a constant, like about every 20 seconds. The thing about that story, Harrison Bergeron, the way it was set up is if you were really smart, you had to have a buzzer in your ear. And about every 20 seconds, that buzzer would go off and distract you. Because in order to grow intellectually, you need to do deep thinking. How many of you love to read books? Surprising statistic. In the United States right now, the latest figure is only half of our adult population reads books. Okay? We've gotten away from getting the depth. We're in the age of the 20-second soundbite. You see it on the news all the time. We're going to cover all the important things around the world in the next 90 seconds. Well, don't leave anything out. You got 90 seconds. Cover it all, right? Bottom line is we're not doing the deep thinking anymore. And I'm going to touch upon a topic we were talking about at the table, and you guys didn't know I was going to bring it up. I didn't know you were going to bring it up. And so what we're finding is that, think of cement, okay? If you try to write your name in cement and it's just been poured, what's going to happen? You're not going to see anything. If you wait too long, what happens? It's too hard, you can't do it. There's a transition period. Think of the plasticity of the brain in the same way. When you're in that vulnerable period where you're learning stuff, that's when the imprint stays. And that's where we're going after the kids right now when they're young. And we're hooking them. They are becoming addicted to being online for fear of losing out. You guys know Chris, who is the executive director of Cultural Firehouse? I was talking to him last week, a couple weeks ago actually. They do a summer camp for kids where they do arts, they do drama lessons, they put together plays. He said, you can't believe when these kids show up and you say, well, you got to put your cell phone over. I have to have my phone. I got to be able to call my mom. And well, if there's a problem, we'll call your mom. Well, I got to be in touch with my friends. No, you're here to make new friends. He said they have a meltdown. Kids have a meltdown. He said in the worst offenders, the enablers are their parents, the millennials. Yep. It's like, oh no, my son or they have to be able, and they say, they're not here for that. And he said, Barry, it's amazing that at the end of a week or two, these kids learn how to play. They'll put on little skits, they'll learn lines, they'll have fun. We've taken the fun out of being kids with the illusion that this little 4-inch screen, you can go any college, any high school campus, and you want to follow a kid around, they got to just like watch where you're going because this is leading you. All right. How do we change that? I don't know. What scares me right now, gentlemen, is we are at the cusp of AI. and I don't want to turn religious on you, but are we worshiping a false god? Okay, we are taking a gift that we have been given, and we are outsourcing it and saying, AI can do it. Now, I'm going to give you a personal example of somebody I know real close. Works for a data company, a medical services company. They sent that group to Boston to learn the wonderful world of AI, how it's going to help you in your job, what difference this is going to make in you doing it. Now, here's the little asterisk. You have to use AI, but if the company incurs a loss because you used AI, you're going to lose your job. You're not going to fire AI. And isn't that a kick in the teeth? You're told you have to use this. Now, if you're paying attention, look at stuff that you get now that's AI generated. It has a little disclaimer at the bottom. Made by AI, which makes mistakes. Well, we're human, we make mistakes. I don't come with a disclaimer, but I'll tell you up front, I make mistakes, okay? Are we walking down a path now that we know is creating mental illness in our youth? As referenced, I work 2 days a week with a very wonderful group called the Breakaway Respite Ministry out of the Sun City United Methodist Church. I work 2 days a week for 4 hours with individuals who have Alzheimer's and dementia. These people, we meet with them to give them comfort, just to really touch their souls, because there's some great people. Their memory's not clear. You say, well, when were you born? I don't know. 2 minutes later, 1941, okay? It comes back to them. But watching what we know is a one-way trip that doesn't have a good ending is spiritually rewarding that you're helping them as a human being, but also very sad. I would hate to think that as smart as we are as a society, that we are intentionally creating the next generation of mental illness among our children and great-grandchildren. It scares the hell out of me, guys, because we're sitting on the sideline, and like I say, I took a retrospective back looking at where we came from in 1959. 4 years ago, Harrison Bergeron, state of California, in its infinite wisdom, decided that advanced math placement credits was discriminatory. We couldn't have this group being smarter than this group. They tried to pass a law saying that we're not going to raise the bottom, we're going to lower the top. You guys are too smart, you can't take these classes. Public pushback was strong enough that they finally said, we better modify that. That is what scares me today. I appreciate your time. I know I got the signal that I've been up long enough. If I haven't at least created interest, I hope I scared the hell out of you.
We're cutting into lunch, buddy.
Well, hey, in that case, take this mic away.